The invitation no one expected. The hall of the Galactic Concord was never quiet. Voices from over 50 star systems filled the air, deep growls, insect clicks, metallic echoes, and soft telepathic hums. Arguments were normal. Wars started with whispers here. Peace, if it ever came, was always built on fear. Then one day, silence fell. A message had arrived. It was short. Only 6 words. And it came from Earth. We will send one. Just one. The Council didn't understand. One. What? One. Ship, 1 fighter, 1 bomb? No. The answer came hours later when a small craft entered neutral space. It had no weapons, no shields. It was unarmed. Inside sat one man. His name was Jonah Wren. He looked plain. No medals, no armor, no glowing skin like the Ilari, no shifting scales like the Drazak. Just soft eyes, tired from travel, and a strange silver case by his side. A reptilian leader from the Vark hissed, "This is a joke. They send a child." "He's not a child," said the AI diplomat from the binary colonies. "He's their ambassador." The others laughed. Hard, cruel laughter. But Jonah didn't flinch. He stood calmly, eyes scanning the room as if he saw something they did not. A 3-eyed warlord leaned forward. "You bring no soldiers, no drones, no threats. What can a single man offer?" Jonah smiled a little. "Understanding." They laughed louder. This time even the machines chuckled. Jonah sat in the empty human seat. He placed the silver case on the table. Everyone stared. Some reached for weapons. But Jonah did nothing. "What is that?" asked the insect queen of the Xerians. "A translator," he said softly. "But not just words. It shows truth." The room grew tense. Everyone lied here. It was part of the game. Truth was dangerous. Truth broke alliances. "Nonsense," grunted a massive Brune general. "Truth is different for every species." "Maybe," Jonah replied, "but intent isn't." They didn't understand. Not yet. The head of the Concord, a floating being of pure light called the Luminarch, pulsed brighter. "And what is your intent, Jonah Wren?" He leaned forward, calm and certain. "To listen, to learn, and to stop a war before it begins." A hush fell over the chamber. The Luminarch studied him. "Earth is new to the stars. How do you plan to stop a war that has lasted 1,000 cycles?" Jonah looked around. "By starting a conversation that has never been tried." The Brune general pounded the table. "Peace requires strength," Jonah nodded. "That's why I'm here, because we are strong enough to come in peace." Some murmured, some sneered. A few looked thoughtful. Then the door opened again. 2 guards entered with a report. A minor skirmish had broken out on the border of the Kryn territory. The same area where Earth's aid ships had been sent last year. "This is proof," shouted one delegate. "Humans are moving pieces in silence. They talk peace while setting traps." Jonah stayed seated. "Check the records." "We don't believe Earth's records," spat the warlord. "Then check your own," Jonah said. "We helped the wounded. We fed children. And then we left." The guards hesitated. One of them checked the files. His eyes widened. "He's telling the truth." Shock spread across the room. Jonah opened his case slowly. Inside was a glowing sphere, faintly pulsing. He placed it in the center of the table. "This is called the mirror," he said. "It takes spoken language and reveals the emotion behind it. Fear, anger, lies, hope." The insect queen whispered, "That's impossible." Jonah's voice was calm. "Try it." The Luminarch floated closer and spoke. "This meeting is balanced and fair." The mirror glowed red. Gasps filled the chamber. Jonah looked at the light being. "That wasn't truth. It was what you wanted to be true." The Luminarch didn't deny it. "Do you see now?" Jonah said. "I don't need a weapon. Truth is strong enough." The warlord stood. "And if we throw you out?" Jonah stood too. "Then I'll go," he said. But your people will still talk. They'll still hear. And one by one they'll begin to wonder, why did Earth send just one man? The door stayed closed. No one moved. The council remained quiet even after Jonah sat again. He didn't speak more that day. He didn't need to. Because for the first time in 1,000 cycles, the great chamber of the Galactic Concord had more questions than answers, and all of them started with one word: why? A chair at the table and eyes on the human Jonah Wren returned to the Concord Hall the next morning, walking the same narrow path he had taken the day before. This time the silence around him wasn't mockery, it was curiosity. Eyes, some visible, some hidden behind masks, scales, or veils of smoke, followed him as he moved. No one tried to stop him. No one dared. His silver case was still in his hand, untouched, unbroken. It was no longer seen as a simple tool. It was something more. Something dangerous. Something sacred. When he reached the round table at the center of the chamber, he paused. The human chair stood at the far end, small, plain, and empty for years. No human had ever been allowed to sit there. The seat was symbolic, offered but never used. Until now. Jonah pulled the chair back and sat without asking permission. This small action sent a wave of quiet tension through the room. The Brune general leaned toward a neighboring envoy and whispered, "He has no army, but he acts like a conqueror." Jonah heard him, but he didn't respond. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a thin black folder. No one expected paper. In a world of data beams and mind links, physical documents were rare. Strange. Ancient. He opened the folder, slowly, and placed it on the table. Inside were images, photographs, children in war zones, burned homes, empty food bowls, but also hands reaching out, medical workers smiling, strangers helping strangers. He didn't say a word. He simply let the photos sit. The insect queen of the Xerians buzzed with discomfort. "What is the meaning of this, human?" Jonah looked up. "Earth knows war, more than we wish. But that's why we don't send warriors anymore. We send listeners." The room stirred again. "What does listening do?" growled the Vark leader. "Listening never stopped a blade." "It stops the hand that lifts it," Jonah replied. The Luminarch pulsed faintly. "You challenge everything this council was built on. Fear, power, survival." "No," Jonah said. "I offer a new foundation, one not made of fear, but of choice." Before anyone could respond, a new alert flashed across the chamber walls. A minor race from the outer rim, once protected under Concord law, had just been attacked by a larger empire. Again. Jonah closed his eyes briefly. "How many times will we let this happen?" The Brune general grunted. "We send warnings, then sanctions. If they don't stop, we retaliate." Jonah opened his eyes. Calm, but sharp. "And how often does that stop them?" No answer. He stood and walked to the center. "We keep repeating the same pattern. Punish, strike, forget. But we never listen to why they attacked. What if we're not stopping violence, we're feeding it?" He raised the silver device, the mirror, and placed it on the table again. "I offer a challenge. No punishment, no army, just one day of truth." The room grew tense again. Some were angry, others afraid. "One day?" the AI diplomat asked. "What do you mean?" "One day," Jonah said, "where every delegate agrees to speak through the mirror. One day of truth-talking, no masks, no speeches, just real voices." The insect queen hissed. "You want to expose us?" "No," he said gently. "I want to free you." The Luminarch said nothing for a long time. Then slowly its light dimmed, signaling deep thought. "A test," it finally said. 24 hours. Mirror-only dialogue. Jonah nodded. "I'll be here." As he sat again, the Brune general rose in protest. "This is madness. What if he's manipulating us? What if that device is false?" Jonah reached into his jacket and pulled out a second object, round, glass-like, glowing. "This is a backup," he said. "Take it. Test it. Break it if you must. You'll find the same thing. Truth beneath words." Hesitant, the general took the orb and handed it to his science officer. They scanned it on the spot. Every frequency, every signal. It wasn't transmitting. It wasn't hiding anything. It was clean. Jonah leaned back. "We don't need you to believe in humans. Just believe in the truth." As the chamber emptied, whispers filled the air. Something had changed. Not loudly, not violently, but deeply. The human didn't shout, didn't demand, didn't threaten. He simply listened. And now, the galaxy would too. Empires tremble at the sound of honesty. The chamber was cold the next morning, not because of temperature but because of tension. Even the walls of the great hall seemed to sense that something rare and dangerous was about to unfold. Ambassadors arrived early, their guards standing closer than usual. Whispers were traded like weapons. Many had slept poorly, if at all. The Galactic Concord had never experienced a day of truth. No one really knew what it meant. Jonah was already seated. His silver case lay open in front of him, the mirror pulsing gently with soft light as if it were breathing. He had no security, no entourage. Just a flask of water, a plain notepad, and the patience of someone who had seen too much pain to be shaken by pride. One by one, the delegates took their seats. The Brune general arrived in full armor, though it wasn't needed. The insect queen came surrounded by guards with venom sacs exposed, clicking nervously. Even the Luminarch, a being of pure energy, appeared dimmer than usual, like a sun preparing. For eclipse, the Luminarch gave the signal. "We begin." Jonah stood slowly. "This session is open. No title, no judgment. One by one, each of you will speak. Not as leaders, not as rulers, but as beings with pasts, fears, and reasons." The first to speak was the AI diplomat from the binary colonies. Its voice was always calm, emotionless. "Our alliance with the Torvins is purely diplomatic." The mirror flashed yellow. A pause. The AI tilted its head. "Correction. We also collect biometric data during visits to Torvin space." The room murmured. The Torvin representative stood, his face darkening. "You spy on us?" "Affirmative," the AI replied. Not out of pride, but out of an inability to lie anymore. Jonah nodded. "And now they know. Now you both must choose whether to build on truth or destroy each other with it." The session continued. One after another, lies fell like armor to the floor. A warlord from the Ashari admitted he had funded pirates to destabilize trade routes. A smiling diplomat confessed that peace offerings were laced with neural trackers. Even the insect queen, who prided herself on secrecy, broke into tears as she whispered about the genocide her people had endured, hidden for generations to preserve political favor. Some ambassadors grew angry. Others grew quiet. None left. Jonah didn't judge. He didn't interrupt. He only listened. And the mirror glowed on. Then came a moment no one expected. A delegate from the Falorans, a weak aquatic race with no military, stood slowly. Her voice trembled. "For years, we've been afraid. Afraid of speaking. Afraid of being seen as weak. We signed agreements that hurt our people just to survive. We smiled while our oceans were poisoned by treaties we never understood." Jonah stepped forward, gently placing the mirror closer to her. "And now?" he asked. The Faloran ambassador wiped her eyes. "Now, for the first time, I feel seen." The hall went silent. What had started as a test was quickly becoming a mirror, not just for words, but for history. Every being saw a piece of themselves reflected in that light. Not the powerful version they presented, but the quiet pain they carried beneath. Not everyone was pleased. In a dark corridor behind the council floor, several delegates met in secret. Their shadows formed shapes of fear and fury. "This human must be stopped," the Brune general growled. "He's turning our weaknesses into power for the lesser races," another hissed. "We built this Concord on fear, on deals. If he keeps speaking, we lose control." A plan was made, not to kill Jonah. That would turn him into a martyr. No, something worse. They would humiliate him, break the myth, prove that truth was only powerful in stories. The next day, when Jonah entered the council, a new item had been placed on the table, a small sphere, harmless in appearance. A gift, the Luminarch announced. A gesture of openness. Jonah studied it. May I? The Luminarch nodded. He touched the sphere. At first, nothing happened. Then it lit up, projecting hundreds of video feeds into the air. Scenes of war, human war, nuclear fire, tribal killing, hunger, greed, betrayal, all of it, human. The chamber filled with gasps and smug smiles. The Brune general stood. This is your truth, Jonah Wren. Your people are no different, no better. Jonah looked at the images. He didn't flinch, didn't deny. Instead, he walked to the center of the storm and said, "You're right." A ripple of surprise moved through the room. "We are violent," he said. "We have destroyed. We have failed. Again and again." He paused, looking each ambassador in the eye. "But we remember. We carry those scars. We teach our children about our mistakes. And we keep trying, not because we are perfect, but because we know what happens when truth is buried." The mirror glowed white, pure truth, no deceit, no pride, just honesty, heavy and beautiful. Some delegates stared at him in silence. Others looked down in shame. And somewhere deep within the chamber, a very old alien with no name smiled quietly. Because for the first time in ages, someone had spoken, without fear. And in that moment, the foundations of the galaxy began to shift, not with weapons, but with words. The spark of rebellion among the stars, the galaxy didn't shake with explosions. It shook with silence. A silence so deep, so wide, that even the warlords felt it in their bones. A silence born not from peace but from the stillness before a storm, one made of voices, not bombs. 3 days had passed since Jonah Wren's truth session. The mirror still sat in the center of the chamber, glowing with soft pulses, untouched, but never ignored. It had become more than a device. It had become a symbol of fear for the powerful and of hope for the forgotten. Word spread quickly beyond the Concord. Small colonies, ones often overlooked and overruled, began holding their own mirror sessions, broadcasting them across the stars. On a frozen moon where miners were once silenced by pain contracts, workers now stood before cameras telling the truth. On a jungle world ruled by silent overseers, farmers whispered their secrets into homemade mirrors made from reflective metal and stolen tech. And on a drifting station at the edge of the galactic rim, an old pilot played Jonah's speech on loop, letting children learn his words before they learned their own alphabets. The powerful watched in horror. It had begun. The insect queen of the Xerians, who had once ruled 20 slave moons, could no longer enter her chambers without seeing graffiti sprayed by her own citizens. Simple words, "We remember." One night, she summoned Jonah privately. Her guards waited outside, armed with venom darts and bone blades. She stood tall and shook with rage, but her voice was low. "What have you done to my world?" Jonah looked at her with calm eyes. "I didn't change it. I just showed them how to speak." "They are insects," she snapped. "They obey. They don't think." Jonah tilted his head gently. "But what if they always did?" She stared at him. No reply came. Only the quiet hum of her palace breathing around them. In another sector, the Brune general faced a different storm. His soldiers, strong, loyal, born for war, were questioning their orders. They had seen the footage, seen Jonah's mirror show. Generals lying about the cost of war, about children dying on outer planets, about the truth behind their victories. One captain walked away during a ceremony. Another refused to fire on a rebel cruiser. A third removed his medals and broadcasted, "If a human without a gun can speak, so can I." The general roared with fury in his war chamber. I want Jonah Wren broken, not dead. Broken, humiliated. They tried. On the fourth day, while Jonah walked alone through the gardens of the Concord station, a delegation of Empire heads appeared. They smiled in public, but their hands were heavy with threats. Ambassador Wren, one of them said smoothly, there are whispers that your efforts are destabilizing peace. Was there ever peace? Jonah asked, pausing beside a tree, whose leaves sang in light winds. There was order, the other replied coldly, and order is the only thing that keeps blood off the walls. Jonah didn't argue, he only stepped forward. So you admit, truth leads to chaos? Truth leads to collapse, they replied. Then maybe what you built deserved to fall, he said. They offered him deals, power, position, a permanent seat on the High Council. They told him he could guide change from within, control the spread, slow it down. He smiled softly. Truth doesn't work like that. The next morning, something happened no one expected. A young race known as the Virelli, barely 100 years into space travel, requested a hearing before the Concord. They had never spoken in the chamber before. They had always remained silent, afraid, invisible. But now, they stood. A young Virelli named Silra spoke. Her voice was uneven, her translator clunky, but her words were sharp. We were never weak, only quiet. For years your treaties pushed us out. Your ships mined our skies, and your words painted us as slow, backward, useless. But today we speak. Jonah stepped aside and gestured for her to take his place at the table. The other delegates shifted uncomfortably. Silra placed a mirror of her own on the table, crafted from scraps, bound with wire, powered by solar dust. She stared at the Brune. General, do you deny bombing our atmosphere last cycle? He stood. It was a navigation error. The mirror glowed red. Try again, she said, bolder now. The general's jaw tightened. We believed your land was unoccupied. The mirror pulsed orange. The general looked away. Silra smiled, not with joy but with release. We've waited a lifetime for honesty, she whispered. Now we have it. That night, more than 100 systems declared their independence from Empire agreements, not through war, not with violence, just words, signed, witnessed, and broadcasted. And always, beside every speech, every voice, every truth, a small, glowing mirror. The war that started with no weapon, the first attack didn't come from a fleet. It came from silence. Galactic channels, once filled with the echo of truth sessions, and mirror speeches suddenly went dark. Hundreds of transmission nodes were deactivated. Local networks crashed. Independent voices vanished. Systems who had spoken out days earlier were now unreachable. Jonah sat alone in the Concord chamber as the news reached him. His hands folded over the silver case, his eyes heavy. Around him, the seats of many delegates stood empty. Not all had fled, but many were told to stay silent. And most obeyed. Outside, warships from the old empires had started to move. Not toward enemy planets, but toward the neutral zones, places that had dared to listen. These ships didn't fire immediately. Instead, they hovered, like shadows, like warnings. Jonah understood what it meant. This was the oldest kind of power. Fear. He walked to the edge of the chamber where the central holomap glowed faintly. He watched as blue dots representing voices slowly blinked out one by one. Colonies, stations, mining moons, each gone from the net. A voice called out behind him. It was the insect queen. You started something you cannot protect, she said, her tone colder than before. They are silencing planets, Jonah. Not with bombs, but with pressure. Trade blockades, food restrictions, communication blackouts. Jonah turned to her, weary but unshaken. They are proving me right. The Brune general entered next, not with soldiers but with words sharpened like knives. You made our enemies brave, he said. Now they rise against us. You made the weak believe they had power. That was your mistake. Jonah didn't reply. Instead, he picked up the mirror, turned it toward the general, and asked, "Are you afraid?" The general smiled mockingly. "Of you? Never." The mirror pulsed deep orange. Not a lie, just fear. "It's not me you fear," Jonah said softly. "It's your people. Because you know what happens when they no longer need you." That night, as darkness spread across the stars, Jonah made a decision. He walked into the council chamber once more, though few remained to hear him, and placed the mirror at the center of the room. A recording beacon blinked to life. He faced, then he spoke. "To anyone still listening," he began, "I know what's happening. I see the silence. I see the ships. And I know many of you are scared." He paused, his eyes holding still. "I am too. I'm not here because I'm stronger, or smarter, or unafraid. I'm here because I know what silence leads to. I've seen it on Earth. We once silenced each other with bombs and bullets. Now others try to silence you with laws and darkness. But I came here to remind you, silence is not peace." The mirror glowed white. "Peace is when the smallest voice can still speak," he said. "When a farmer on a dust world can question a king and live to tell the tale. When children don't have to lie to eat. When truth isn't a crime." The recording spread faster than the empires could contain it. Deepnets picked it up. Smugglers streamed it through old trade beacons. Rebel channels embedded it inside cargo manifests. Within hours, it was heard in places no fleet could reach. In the following days, something unexpected happened. Resistance didn't come from guns. It came from refusal. Doctors across 5 systems stopped reporting to imperial clinics. They opened free ones. Translators, once used to serve elites, began giving free mirror devices to villages. Farmers refused to ship food to war zones. Engineers leaked codes to unlock energy systems once controlled by Empire licenses. It wasn't a battle. It was a break. An old Empire leader called an emergency meeting. "They are not fighting," he shouted. "They are just walking away," another replied. "Because they've found something we can't offer. Belief." Jonah's message echoed again. "We win without war." But not everyone celebrated. In a dark sector near the core, a ship moved quietly, unmarked, cloaked, illegal. Inside it, plans were unfolding. Jonah Wren would be taken, not killed, not harmed, but removed. Disappeared. A shadow team was sent. They would reach Concord Station within 2 days. Jonah disappears, but the stars remember. No alarm sounded the night Jonah Wren vanished. There was no explosion, no gunfire, no flashing lights. Only silence, the same kind he had once broken with words. His quarters on Concord Station were found empty at dawn. His flask still sat on the table, half full. The mirror was gone. So was his jacket. The air smelled faintly of mint tea and space dust. There was no forced entry, no security breach. The cameras always watching had all gone dark for 3 minutes. Exactly 3. The Brune general claimed he had left of his own will. The Insect Queen suggested it was a political stunt. The Luminarch said nothing, but dimmed for an entire cycle, a sign of mourning among its kind. But the people, they felt it in their bones. Something had changed. Jonah's disappearance swept across the galaxy like cold wind before a storm. Protests erupted outside Empire gates. Entire moons dimmed their lights in mourning. In distant sectors, children held mirrors made of scrap metal and whispered his name like a prayer. But the silence grew heavier. Without Jonah to speak, the empires moved swiftly. Mirror devices were banned in 12 systems. A shipment of them was destroyed in orbit. In another system, a teacher who held a truth session was arrested and never seen again. Old laws returned with new names. Old rulers wore new masks. But something was different now. They were not feared the same way. In a mining colony beneath the surface of Astra 9, a man named Kelry, a miner with broken teeth and thick hands, stood before a group of workers and said, "He's not gone. He's in all of us now." And then, against the rules, he placed a mirror in the center of their break room. And they spoke. They spoke of broken machines, withheld pay, lost family, and dreams crushed by silence. They didn't shout. They didn't march. They remembered. And, on a tiny moon named Talara, where water was scarce and books were forbidden, a 10-year-old girl named Aya drew Jonah's face in the dirt with her finger. She had only heard his voice once, on a smuggled broadcast that barely made it through, but it changed her. She gathered her friends, and each evening, they gathered around a piece of shiny metal and took turns telling the truth. Not about politics, not about war, but about their dreams. One wanted to fly. One wanted to write. One wanted to leave the moon and meet people who didn't speak in orders. And Aya? She just wanted to speak and be heard. In the absence of Jonah, the voice of the galaxy fractured into thousands of smaller voices, each one trying to remember how to be brave. And still, in the high towers of the empires, fear began to grow. Not fear of war, but fear of failure, because despite their power, despite their ships and soldiers, despite their silencing, the idea Jonah planted would not die. In private, an empire strategist said, "We took the man, but not his message." The Brune general roared, "Then take the message! But how do you kill an idea? How do you silence a thought once it's spoken in 1,000 languages?" Then, without warning, a signal appeared. It came not from Earth, not from the Concorde, but from a drifting satellite long thought broken. The signal was weak, corrupted by time and space, but clear enough. Jonah's voice, recorded, archived, alive. "If you're hearing this," he said, "then I'm not with you." But the truth is, his voice was tired, not broken, not afraid, just human. "You don't need me. You never did. You only needed someone to remind you that silence is a choice, and so is courage." He paused, then added, "Let them take my voice, but only if you let them take yours too." The signal looped, played again, spread fast. A new storm rose. This one didn't carry weapons. This one carried memory, and the empires, for the first time in 1,000 years, saw something they could not stop. Belief. The day the stars spoke human, they called it the Quiet Revolution, not because there were no voices, but because there were too many to count. Weeks had passed since Jonah Wren disappeared, and yet the galaxy had not returned to the old ways. It tried. The empires reinstated fear. They blocked shipments. They punished speakers. They erased records. In some places, they even built shrines to themselves again, pretending nothing had ever changed. But something had, and it was too late to stop it. The mirror sessions had gone underground, hidden, mobile, alive. Travelers carried them in their bags, disguised as toys. Children drew them into sand. Prisoners carved them into stone walls. What began as a movement led by one man had now become a memory shared by everyone. In a dusty village on the edge of Talara's western plains, 10-year-old Aya sat on a rock, under the blue dusk sky, cradling a cracked piece of mirror in her hands. Her parents were afraid. Her teachers warned her. But she remembered Jonah's voice. It had reached her once through a broken signal. It had stuck in her chest like a seed, and now it was growing. That night, as the stars shimmered above her head, she placed the mirror on the ground and spoke aloud, even though no one had asked her to. "I am not important," she said, "but I want to be heard." The mirror didn't glow. It didn't need to. She spoke of her fears, of nights when her family went hungry, of watching soldiers shout at her brother for asking questions. She spoke of how the village elder said the empires were strong, but how Jonah showed her that strength wasn't the same as control. Her voice was soft, unsure, but true. And then, something happened. The wind shifted. A tall woman with silver eyes stepped from the shadows. Behind her were two men carrying small devices, both blinking. They had traveled from across the stars searching for places where Jonah's message still lived. They had found it here. "Your voice?" the woman said, was just heard on 17 systems. Aya blinked. How? The woman smiled. Because Jonah left more than a speech. He left a beacon. And far above, in orbit over Talara, a small satellite came to life. It had been floating in silence for months, cloaked, dormant, unnoticed. Its name was Echo 1 and it held a single program. When a new voice speaks the truth, amplify it across the stars. Jonah had placed it there before he vanished. Not as a weapon, not as insurance, but as faith. He believed someone someday would continue what he started, and now it had begun. Aya's words, once meant for no one but the mirror, were now spreading like stardust. Her name became a whisper of light. Not a leader, not a savior, just a girl with a voice. And in the deepest chambers of the old empires, something strange happened. Leaders stopped laughing. One by one, they realized they had lost not to weapons, not to ships, not even to Jonah Wren, but to hope. In the months that followed, the movement only grew. A new council formed, not of warlords, but of listeners. Each seat was earned, not given. Members rotated. No one ruled for long. And at its center, in place of a throne, was a simple object. Jonah's mirror, mounted on a ring of steel, open to anyone who wished to speak. They named the new chamber the Circle of Echoes. One day, the luminarch returned. It had dimmed for many cycles, but now it pulsed with new energy. It hovered above the circle and said, I judged the human. Now I understand him. The circle made no reply. It didn't need to. Truth didn't belong to one voice anymore. And though Jonah was never seen again, though his silver case was never found, his presence was felt in every whisper, every act of courage, every child who dared to speak. On the anniversary of his last speech, every system that once silenced the truth now celebrated the day the stars spoke human, not with parades, but with silence. A minute of stillness, followed by voices rising, one after another. Not perfect, not fearless, but finally free.